Zisha walked into the office, her four fingers clutching a data pad as she hurried to her desk. She kept her head low, hoping no one would notice her. But as usual, the whispers began the moment she entered the room. "Look, the little Verlax is here again," sneered a tall, scaled Tarkan, his sharp teeth flashing in amusement. "I bet she messed up another report," laughed a Zephyrian with glowing red eyes. "Her kind is too weak for corporate work. Why does the boss even keep her around?" Zisha ignored them. She had learned long ago that responding only made things worse. Instead, she focused on her work. She was fast, efficient, and careful. Numbers and reports made sense to her, more than people ever did. The Intergalactic Trade Corporation had been her dream job. When she got accepted, she thought she had finally proven that Verlaxians could do more than just serve as low-level assistants. But her excitement didn't last long. From the first day, she was treated like an outsider. The other employees, mostly from physically stronger species, saw her as weak. They pushed her aside in meetings, stole credit for her work, and made sure she always felt small. But there was one person who was different. Her boss, Ethan Carter, the only human in the department. Ethan wasn't like the others. He never laughed at her, never ignored her ideas. He spoke to her with respect, something no one else did. He even thanked her when she did a good job. To Zisha, Ethan was fascinating. Humans were known to be unpredictable, but they were also different from other species. They didn't follow the same hierarchy rules as the rest of the galaxy. They valued things like loyalty, determination, and fairness, things that most others saw as weaknesses. And Ethan was the best example of that. Whenever Zisha messed up, he didn't yell at her. Instead, he explained how to fix the mistake. When she submitted reports, he actually read them. And when others tried to interrupt her in meetings, he would cut them off and say, "Let her finish." To Zisha, Ethan was more than just a good boss. He was her hero, and that terrified her. One day, Zisha was working late, her bioluminescent markings faintly glowing in the dim office light. She was finishing a report when she heard footsteps behind her. "Still here?" Ethan's deep voice made her jump. She turned quickly, nodding. "Ah, yes, sir. Just finishing the supply chain report." Ethan crossed his arms and leaned against her desk. "I told you before, you don't have to call me sir. Just Ethan is fine." Zisha lowered her gaze. "Sorry. Okay, Ethan." He smiled. "See, not so hard." Zisha didn't smile back. She wasn't used to kindness. It made her nervous. Ethan frowned as he looked at her screen. "You did all this by yourself?" "Yes," she said softly. He shook his head in disbelief. "You know, this is impressive. It's better than the reports some of the senior analysts send me." Zisha's heart fluttered at the compliment, but she quickly pushed the feeling down. "He's just being nice," she reminded herself. "Don't read too much into it." Ethan sighed. "I know they're giving you a hard time." Zisha stiffened. He noticed. "I've seen how they treat you," he continued. "It's not right." Zisha looked away. "It doesn't matter." Ethan leaned forward, his voice firm but gentle. "It does." For a moment, she didn't know what to say. No one had ever said that before. After a long silence, Ethan spoke again. "If anyone crosses the line, you tell me, okay?" Zisha hesitated, then nodded. But deep down, she knew she wouldn't. She didn't want to cause trouble, especially not for him. "All right," Ethan said, pushing off her desk. "Go home soon, Zisha. Don't work too hard." She watched him leave, her heart pounding. She knew it was impossible. A human, and a Verlax. He would never see her the way she saw him. But as she packed up her things and left the office, she couldn't stop the small hope growing inside her. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she thought. Zisha sat at her desk, typing carefully as she reviewed the latest shipment reports. She had double-checked everything, making sure there were no mistakes. One mistake meant another excuse for her coworkers to mock her. She tried to focus, but the whispers around her were impossible to ignore. "Look at her, always acting so serious," murmured a Zephyrian nearby. A Tarkin smirked. "Maybe she thinks if she works hard enough, the boss will like her." Zisha's fingers tensed against the keyboard. She wanted to say something, but she knew it was useless. If she spoke up, they would only mock her more. She had learned long ago that silence was safer. Across the office, Ethan Carter was watching. He leaned back in his chair, his sharp human eyes scanning the room. He had seen how Zisha's coworkers treated her. They weren't just ignoring her, they were targeting her. At first, he thought maybe it was just harmless teasing, but the more he watched, the more he realized it was worse than that. They stole credit for her work, excluded her from meetings, and made jokes at her expense. And Zisha, she never fought back. That bothered him the most. Ethan had worked with many different alien species in his career, but humans had a rule: you don't let your own suffer alone. And Zisha, whether she realized it or not, was his responsibility. He wouldn't let this continue. A few days later, a big department meeting was scheduled. Everyone was gathered in the main conference room, sitting around the circular table. Zisha was at the far end, as usual, keeping her head low. Ethan stood at the front, reviewing the latest reports. Zisha's work had been the most accurate, again. But when he looked at the slides, he frowned. Her name wasn't there. He glanced across the table at a tall, confident Zephyrian named Kalvik, one of the biggest bullies in the office. The report being presented had Zisha's numbers, but Kalvik's name. Ethan's jaw tightened. Enough. He cleared his throat. "Kalvik, these numbers are impressive, but there's a problem." Kalvik smirked. "Oh, what's that, sir?" Ethan tapped the screen. "This isn't your work." The room went silent. Kalvik shifted in his seat. What do you mean?" Ethan's gaze was cold. "I've seen the original files. This report was prepared by Zisha." All eyes turned to Zisha. She shrank under their stares, her bioluminescent markings flickering nervously. Kalvik forced a laugh. "Well, I mean, we all work together." "Don't lie to me," Ethan interrupted, his voice sharp. "I don't tolerate dishonesty in my department." Kalvik's face darkened, but he didn't argue. Ethan turned to Zisha. "Zisha, from now on, I want you to personally submit your reports directly to me. No middlemen. Understood?" Zisha's eyes widened. "Ah, yes, sir." Ethan nodded, then addressed the room. "And let me be clear, credit goes where credit is due. If I see this happen again, there will be consequences." The meeting continued, but the mood had shifted. No one dared to mock Zisha now. Later that day, Zisha was at her desk when Ethan walked up. "You all right?" he asked. She looked up at him, her bright silver eyes filled with hesitation. I didn't expect you to do that." Ethan crossed his arms. "Why not?" She hesitated. "No one has ever stood up for me before." Ethan frowned. "That's a problem. You're good at what you do, Zisha. You shouldn't let anyone take that from you." Zisha lowered her gaze. "They'll hate me more now." Ethan exhaled. "Maybe. But now, they know I'm watching." She looked at him, her heart pounding. He wasn't just being kind. He was protecting her. She wanted to tell him how much it meant to her. How, for the first time, she didn't feel completely alone. But instead, she just nodded. "Thank you, Ethan," she said softly. He smiled. "Anytime." As he walked away, Zisha realized something. Maybe humans weren't just strong because of their physical power. Maybe their real strength was something else entirely. And she was beginning to admire it more than she should. Zisha sat at her desk, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed. The office was unusually quiet, but she could feel the tension in the air. Ever since Ethan Carter had exposed Kalvik for stealing her work, things had changed. No one mocked her outright anymore. No one dared to take credit for her reports. But instead of stopping, the hostility had shifted. Now, they ignored her completely. It wasn't just silence, it was cold. Whenever she entered a room, conversation stopped. When she tried to speak, no one responded. During lunch breaks, there was never an empty seat for her. At first, Zisha told herself it was fine. She had always been alone. This wasn't new. But deep down, it hurt more than she wanted to admit. That afternoon, Ethan called for another department meeting. Zisha walked into the conference room and sat in her usual corner, trying to make herself as small as possible. Ethan stood at the front, scanning the room with his sharp human gaze. "All right, let's get started," he said, opening the main report on the screen. "We've got an issue." The screen displayed a detailed analysis of a shipment failure, one that had cost the company thousands of credits. Zisha stiffened. She recognized this data. It was her report, the one she had finalized last night. But the numbers had been changed. Someone had altered her calculations to make it look like she had made a mistake. Her heart pounded. Who submitted this? Ethan's voice was calm, but too calm. The kind of calm that came before a storm. A Tarkin named Wrecker shrugged. That was Zisha's department, wasn't it? Zisha's blood ran cold. Another coworker smirked. "Yeah, she's been making a lot of mistakes lately." A few quiet chuckles spread around the table. Ethan's expression didn't change. "Zisha," he said, turning to her, "is this your work?" Zisha swallowed hard. She could feel every eye in the room on her, waiting to see if she would break. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I did the report, but the numbers." Kalvik interrupted. "Come on, Carter. You're not really defending her again, are you?" Ethan turned his head slowly, his expression unreadable. "Excuse me." Kalvik leaned back, smirking. "Face it, she's just not cut out for this job. You keep protecting her, but she's still useless. If she wasn't here, we wouldn't be dealing with these failures." The room went silent. Zisha clenched her fists under the table, her bioluminescent markings dimming with shame. Ethan didn't speak immediately. Instead, he tapped a few buttons on his datapad. The screen changed, showing security logs from the office database. A clear audit trail showed the report had been modified by Kalvik and Wrecker. The smirk vanished from Kalvik's face. Ethan's voice was sharp as a blade. "You were saying?" Wrecker paled. That's not." "Save it." Ethan cut him off. "I don't care for excuses." His blue eyes were cold, his usual easygoing nature gone. "You tried to sabotage a coworker. Not just any coworker, one of my best employees." Zisha's eyes widened. "Best employee?" Ethan turned to the rest of the room. "Let me make something very clear." His voice was calm but dangerous. "I don't care what species you are. I don't care who you think deserves respect. What I care about is results." He gestured to Zisha. "And Zisha, she delivers, every time. Without taking shortcuts, without stealing credit." His gaze hardened. "Unlike some of you." The silence in the room was absolute. Ethan crossed his arms. "I'll be filing a formal complaint about this. HR will decide what happens next. But if I catch anything like this again..." He let the sentence hang in the air, the unspoken threat heavier than words. Kalvik and Wrecker looked like they wanted to disappear. Zisha, on the other hand, felt something strange bubbling inside her. For the first time in years, she felt seen. After the meeting, Zisha hurried back to her desk. Her heart was still racing. She had never imagined anyone would fight for her like that. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice Ethan approaching until he spoke. "You okay?" She looked up at him, her silver eyes filled with confusion. "Why? Why did you do that?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Why wouldn't I?" "Because no one else ever does." Her voice was soft, almost fragile. Ethan sighed and leaned against her desk. "Listen, Zisha, I've been in tough places before. I know what it's like when people try to push you down. And I also know the only way to win is to push back." Zisha hesitated. "But I can't. I'm not like you. I'm not strong." Ethan chuckled. Strength isn't just about fighting. You keep working hard, no matter how they treat you. That's strength. Zisha blinked. It is. Yeah, Ethan said, standing straight. But that doesn't mean you have to do it alone. She stared at him, her heart beating faster. Was this what humans were really like? Not just strong, but loyal. Zisha didn't know what she had done to deserve Ethan's kindness, but for the first time, she allowed herself to hope. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. Maybe she never had been. The office was quieter than usual. Zisha noticed it the moment she walked in. The usual whispers and mocking chuckles had disappeared. The coworkers who once smirked at her now avoided eye contact. The tension in the air was thick, but different from before. They weren't ignoring her out of disdain anymore. They were afraid. She knew why. Ethan Carter had changed everything. After exposing Kalvik and Wrecker for manipulating the reports, their positions in the department had weakened. The rest of the team, once confident in treating Zisha like an outsider, now hesitated. She wasn't invisible anymore, but that didn't mean she was safe. By midday, she was deep in her work when she received an anonymous message on her terminal. You think the human can always protect you. Watch yourself, Verlax. Her fingers froze on the keyboard. Her heart pounded. She knew the message wasn't an empty threat. Even though Kalvik and Wrecker hadn't been fired, they had been humiliated. And now their anger had no direction, except toward her. She inhaled slowly, pushing the fear down. She had endured worse. She just had to stay quiet. She wouldn't make trouble. But later that evening, she realized trouble had already found her. Zisha had stayed late, as usual. The office was empty except for the quiet hum of machinery. She was finishing her final report when she heard footsteps behind her. Too many footsteps. She turned just as Kalvik, Wrecker, and two others stepped into the dimly lit office space. Her stomach tightened. You've been acting real bold lately, Zisha, Kalvik said, crossing his arms. His sharp red eyes glowed under the artificial light. I don't want any trouble, she said carefully. Wrecker scoffed. Too late for that. You embarrassed us in front of the boss. You made us look weak. Zisha shook her head. I didn't. Shut up, Kalvik snapped, stepping closer. You think just because the human likes you, you're special, that he's going to save you every time. Zisha took a step back, her back hitting the desk. Please, I just want to finish my work. Wrecker chuckled darkly. Oh, don't worry. You'll have plenty of time to work after we teach you a lesson. They moved closer. Zisha's hands clenched. She knew she couldn't fight them. Verlaxians were weaker than Tarkans and Zephyrians. If they wanted to hurt her, she wouldn't be able to stop them. For a second, she thought about screaming. But the office was empty. No one would hear her. Then, a new set of footsteps. Heavy, confident, human. A familiar voice cut through the tension. You've got 3 seconds to walk away. Zisha's heart nearly stopped. Ethan. The others froze. Kalvik turned his head, his smirk faltering as he saw the tall, broad-shouldered human standing in the doorway. Ethan's expression was unreadable. His blue eyes were cold and sharp, scanning the situation like a predator assessing its prey. Kalvik scoffed. This isn't your business, Carter. Ethan stepped forward. Zisha is my employee. That makes it my business. Wrecker sneered. Oh, come on. We weren't going to do anything serious. Ethan didn't blink. You think I don't know what's been happening? I let a lot of things slide, but threatening a coworker. His voice darkened. That's where I draw the line. The office felt smaller with him there. Zisha had seen Ethan angry before, but never like this. Kalvik laughed, but it was forced. What are you gonna do, human? You think you can take all of us? Ethan tilted his head slightly. Try me. Silence. A long, tense silence. Ethan didn't move. His stance was calm, controlled, but dangerous. Kalvik and Wrecker exchanged glances. They had seen humans fight before. They knew better than to push it. Wrecker gritted his teeth. This isn't over. Yeah, Ethan said flatly. It is. One by one, they backed away. Kalvik shot Zisha one last glare before turning and disappearing down the hallway. The moment they were gone, Zisha exhaled shakily, her knees threatening to give out. Ethan turned to her. You okay? She swallowed hard and nodded. He studied her for a moment. You should have told me they were harassing you. I didn't want to cause problems, she admitted softly. Ethan sighed. Zisha, you don't have to handle this alone. She hesitated. Why do you care so much? Ethan gave her a look, like the answer should have been obvious. Because that's what humans do. We look out for our own. Her breath caught. Our own. Zisha had never felt like she belonged anywhere. Never felt like anyone saw her as more than an outsider. But Ethan, he had just said she was one of them. She looked away, her bioluminescent markings flickering with emotions she couldn't name. Come on, Ethan said, his voice softer now. I'll walk you home. Zisha nodded, following him out of the office. For the first time, she wasn't afraid. And for the first time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. Zisha walked beside Ethan in the dimly lit streets of the city. The artificial lights above cast a soft glow on the metal walkways, and the air had a faint hum from distant hovercrafts passing overhead. She still felt shaken from the encounter in the office. Her mind replayed Kalvik's glare, Wrecker's sneer, and the threat in their voices. But more than that, she remembered Ethan standing between her and them. She glanced up at him. He walked calmly, hands in his pockets, his gaze scanning the surroundings like he was still on alert. He had protected her, again. Thank you, she said quietly. Ethan looked at her. You don't have to thank me, Zisha. I do, she insisted. No one has ever done that for me before. He sighed. They should have. Zisha lowered her gaze, but they didn't. Ethan was silent for a moment before he said, I don't get it. Why do they hate you so much? You've never done anything to them. Zisha hesitated. Because I'm different. Ethan frowned. So what? Everyone in that office is different. We've got 5 species working together. What makes you the target? She took a deep breath. Verlaxians are not seen as strong. We are a peaceful race. We do not fight. We do not argue. We just survive. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's not weakness, Zisha. She gave a small, sad smile. Maybe not to you, but to them, it is. They walked in silence for a while, the city growing quieter as they neared Zisha's small apartment complex. She stopped at the entrance and turned to Ethan. I can make it from here, she said. Ethan nodded but didn't leave. He studied her, his expression unreadable. You sure you're okay? She hesitated. The truth was, she wasn't. She felt exhausted, afraid, alone. But she forced a small nod. I will be. Ethan didn't look convinced, but he didn't push. Instead, he did something that surprised her. He reached out and gently tapped the top of her head. It was quick, barely more than a light touch, but it sent a strange warmth through her chest. If they bother you again, tell me, he said firmly. I don't care what it is. You call me, and I'll handle it. Zisha blinked up at him, her silver eyes wide. You promise? She asked before she could stop herself. Ethan's expression softened. Yeah, Zisha. I promise. She didn't know why, but those words meant more to her than anything she had ever heard before. The next day, Zisha entered the office, unsure of what to expect. Would Kalvik and Wrecker try again? Would the others start harassing her? She kept her head down as she walked to her desk, but something was off. People were staring, but not in their usual way. It wasn't mockery. It was curiosity. She sat down, feeling their gazes lingering on her. Then, to her shock, one of the coworkers, a Zephyrian named Lirak, approached her desk. "Morning," he said awkwardly. Zisha stared at him. "Good morning." Lyric cleared his throat. "But listen, about yesterday. We, saw what happened." Zisha stiffened. "We didn't realize things had gotten that bad," Lyric continued, rubbing the back of his neck. "I mean, we knew Kalvik and Wrecker were jerks, but—" He hesitated. "We should have done something sooner." Zisha blinked. "You saw?" "Yeah." Lyric sighed. Word got around fast. And after Carter called them out in front of everyone, well, let's just say no one wants to be on the wrong side of the human. Zisha wasn't sure what to say. She had been invisible for so long, and now, suddenly, people cared. Lyric shifted uncomfortably. "Anyway, Bud, if you ever need backup, let me know." She stared at him. "Why?" He shrugged. "Because Carter's right. You do good work, and honestly, you're stronger than any of us thought." With that, he walked away, leaving Zisha completely stunned. Had Ethan's actions really changed everything? Later that evening, Zisha worked late again, but this time, she wasn't afraid. She still felt the weight of past fears, but for the first time, she also felt something else: hope. As she gathered her things to leave, she heard familiar footsteps behind her. She turned and found Ethan leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You stayed late again," he said. Zisha gave a small smile. "So did you." Ethan smirked. "Yeah, well, someone's got to make sure you don't get into trouble." She hesitated, then asked, "Why do you care so much, Ethan?" Ethan's smirk faded. He was quiet for a moment before he finally said, "Because I know what it's like to be the underdog." Zisha tilted her head. "But humans are strong." Ethan chuckled. "You think that means we don't struggle?" She frowned. "But no one bullies you." He shook his head. "Not anymore. But back when I first started here, I was just the human who didn't belong. People tried to push me out, make me quit." Zisha's eyes widened. "What did you do?" Ethan smirked. "I worked harder. I proved them wrong." Zisha stared at him, a realization settling in her mind. That's what he wanted for her. He wasn't just protecting her. He was pushing her to be stronger. "You really think I can do that?" she asked quietly. Ethan nodded. "I know you can." For the first time in her life, Zisha believed it too. As they walked out of the office together, she knew things wouldn't change overnight. There would still be challenges. There would still be people who doubted her. But she wasn't alone anymore. And with Ethan by her side, maybe she never would be again. The office had changed. Zisha could feel it. The usual whispers had faded. The mocking glances had turned into wary ones. Kalvik and Wrecker kept their distance, their arrogance replaced with a quiet bitterness. They still hated her. She could see it in their eyes. But they didn't dare act on it. Not after Ethan had stepped in. Not after the entire office had seen that the human boss wouldn't tolerate their cruelty. For the first time since she started working here, Zisha felt something she had never felt before. Respect. She wasn't sure if it came from fear, guilt, or genuine change, but it was there. And that meant everything. A new challenge. Zisha was deep in her work when a notification popped up on her screen. "Urgentmeeting. Executive. All department leads and senior staff must attend." She blinked in surprise. These high-level meetings were rare. And she wasn't a department lead. She wasn't even senior staff. She hesitated, then glanced toward Ethan's office. The glass walls showed him leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, staring at his screen. He looked serious. Before she could ask, another message appeared. "Zisha, come to my office. Ethan." She swallowed hard and stood up, ignoring the curious glances of her coworkers. Something was happening. Something big. A difficult decision. When she entered Ethan's office, he gestured for her to sit. His expression was unreadable. "We've got a problem," he said without preamble. Zisha sat down cautiously. What kind of problem? Ethan exhaled and leaned forward. Corporate is restructuring. They're looking at cutting underperforming departments. And ours. He let out a short laugh. It's on the list. Her heart skipped a beat. But we're not underperforming. Exactly, Ethan said. But Kalvik and Wrecker have powerful connections. They've been feeding corporate reports that paint us as unstable, too much internal conflict. Zisha's stomach twisted. Because of me. Ethan's eyes darkened. No, because of them. But they're trying to spin it as your fault. She looked away. Of course they were. Ethan tapped the desk. The executives want a report on our department's performance. They'll be reviewing our division. If they're not convinced we're valuable, we could all be reassigned, or worse, shut down. Zisha clenched her hands. How can we stop them? Ethan leaned back. We proved them wrong. She frowned. How? Ethan smirked. That's where you come in. Zisha's breath caught. Me. He nodded. You're one of the most efficient workers here. You've done more work than half the team combined, and I want you to present our department's achievements to the executives. Her throat went dry. What? Ethan gave her a steady look. You know the data better than anyone. You've handled most of the repo. Orcs. You can do this. Zisha shook her head. No, I'm not good at speaking. They won't listen to me. Ethan's expression softened. They'll listen if you make them. She hesitated, panic rising in her chest. What if I mess up? Then I'll be right there to back you up, Ethan said. But I don't think you will. You've already proven you're stronger than they think. Zisha swallowed hard. The idea of standing in front of a room full of executives, powerful figures who could decide her future, terrified her. But when she looked at Ethan's face, at the complete faith in his eyes, she wanted to believe in herself too. The meeting. Zisha stood at the front of the executive conference room, gripping the presentation tablet in her shaking hands. A dozen high-ranking officials sat before her, their cold, calculating eyes watching her every move. Ethan stood beside her, offering a reassuring nod. You've got this, he murmured. She took a deep breath and started speaking. At first, her voice was quiet, but as she went through the numbers, the projects they had completed, the efficiency improvements she had helped implement, she felt something shift inside her. This was her work. She had earned her place here. Her voice grew steadier. Her words became sharper, more confident. By the time she finished, the room was silent. One of the executives, a sharp-eyed Tarkan, folded his hands. You've given us a lot to consider, he said. We'll review the data and make a decision soon. Zisha let out a slow breath. She had done it. Aftermath. When they left the meeting room, Zisha felt exhausted. Ethan turned to her with a grin. Told you you'd nail it. She shook her head, still overwhelmed. I don't know if it was enough. Ethan smirked. It was. Trust me. She hesitated. Do you really think they'll keep our department? Ethan's expression turned serious. I don't know, but what I do know is that you just made it a lot harder for them to cut us. Zisha nodded slowly. For the first time in her life, she had stood up, not just for herself, but for others. And it felt good. An unexpected gesture. As they walked back to the office, Ethan suddenly reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. He handed it to her. Zisha looked down. It was a small metal pin, shaped like a human star. What's this? She asked. Ethan shrugged. It's a Terran tradition. When a soldier proves themselves, they get a badge of honor. You just proved yourself today. Zisha stared at the pin, emotions welling up inside her. You didn't have to do this, she whispered. Ethan smiled. Yeah, I did. For the first time in her life, Zisha felt something stronger than fear. She felt pride. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was becoming something more. The office had never been so tense. Everyone waited for the final decision from the executives. Would the department survive, or would they all be reassigned, maybe even fired? Zisha sat at her desk, staring at her screen, unable to focus. She had done everything she could. The presentation had gone well. Ethan had told her she had done a great job. But was it enough? Across the room, Kalvik and Wrecker sat at their desks, pretending to work, but Zisha could feel their smugness. They were waiting, expecting corporate to shut the department down. If that happened, they wouldn't suffer. With their powerful connections, they would find new positions easily. But for Zisha, for people like her who had no allies, no favors to call in, it would be the end. She clenched her hands under the desk. No, she wasn't that weak, frightened for Laxian anymore. She had fought for this job. She had proven herself, and she wasn't going to give up now. The decision. The email came at exactly noon. Final decision on department review. From corporate executives to all employees. The entire office went silent. Everyone clicked the message at the same time. Zisha's heart pounded as she read the words. After reviewing the performance data and employee reports, we have concluded that the department's efficiency has improved significantly. The division will not be shut down. Her breath caught. However, structural changes will be implemented. Leadership roles will be adjusted to ensure long-term stability. Zisha frowned. What did that mean? She turned to Ethan, but he was already standing, eyes scanning his own message. A slow smile spread across his face. Then another message arrived. It was just for Zisha. She hesitated, then clicked it. To Zisha Velerin. From corporate management. Due to your exceptional performance and contributions, we are promoting you to senior analyst. Effective immediately. Her mind went blank. Senior analyst. That was a position with real authority, a role that meant her voice mattered. She barely noticed the buzz of conversation in the office until Lirak, one of the few coworkers who had started treating her with respect, spoke up. Zisha, you got promoted. She looked up, still stunned. Yes. Murmurs spread across the room. Some were surprised, some impressed, and some, like Kalvik and Wrecker, looked furious. Zisha slowly turned to look at them. For the first time, they looked like the ones who had lost. She stood, gathering her courage, and walked straight past them, toward Ethan's office. She didn't need their approval anymore. She had earned her place. A new beginning. Ethan grinned as she stepped into his office. Well. Senior analyst Zisha Velerin. She shook her head, still overwhelmed. I can't believe it. You better, Ethan said. You worked for it. She hesitated. Did you do this? Ethan crossed his arms. I told them you were the best person for the job, but they wouldn't have listened if you hadn't proved it yourself. Zisha felt warmth spread through her chest. A few months ago, she wouldn't have believed this was possible. But now she wasn't just surviving. She was thriving, and she had done it her way. Thank you, she said softly. Ethan smirked. Don't thank me yet. You're gonna have a lot more work now. Zisha laughed, the sound surprising even herself. For the first time in her life, she was looking forward to the future. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't just following in Ethan's footsteps anymore. She was walking beside him.